About 13% of children in the United States have some sort of food allergy. As a new parent, you may be wondering if your child is one of them. What are the most common symptoms to look for? And what are the main foods causing most of the fuss? I'm Lindsay Senevec, registered dietitian and family nutrition specialist, and today we're breaking down the most common food allergies for children. This is Parent Savers.
Faster than a speeding toddler.
Sit still for just a minute.
Can soothe boo-boos with a gentle kiss.
Would you get down from there?
Able to clean poopy bottoms in a single swipe.
Oh, what did you eat?
Turning frazzled mommies and daddies into procreators of peace and harmony.
Ah, quit touching me.
It's Parent Savers, empowering new parents everywhere.
Welcome to Parent Savers, broadcasting from the Birth Education Center of San Diego. Parent Savers is your online, on-the-go support group for parents with infants and toddlers. And I'm your guest host, Sunny Galt. Thanks to all of our loyal listeners who join us every time we release a new episode. And for those of you who like to continue our conversation on Facebook and Twitter, those would be our virtual panelists. If you want to get even more great Parent Savers content, be sure to join the Parent Savers Club. And there's more information about that on our website. And you can also download the Parent Savers app, so you can listen to all of our episodes wherever you go. In fact, most of the moms and dads listen to us that way. So check that out. Now, Kalina, our producer, is going to tell you more about our virtual panelist program.
All right. So if you love the conversation and you'd like to get in on it, but you can't be here with us in studio, you can definitely post on your Twitter, Facebook using the hashtag ParentSaversVP. We can follow up with you, include you in the conversation, and make sure all of your questions get answered.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kalina. Let's meet the parents that are joining us here in the studio. And as we go around, tell us if your child or children have any allergies or sensitivities that you're aware of. You guys know me. I'm Sunny. I am guest hosting today's show, but I'm the owner of New Mommy Media, which produces Parent Savers, Preggy Pals, The Boob Group, and Twin Talks. And I have 4 children of my own. My oldest is 4, and my middle guy's 2, and I have identical twins who are almost a year old. And as far as allergies, sensitivities, nothing that I have found, but I'm reserving that because my children are still pretty young, so we'll see. Scott, what about you?
Hi, I'm Scott. I am a father to a 4-year-old boy, and the only thing that I know for sure is that he has a pretty intense reaction to strawberries when he eats a lot of them. Okay,
good to know. All right, and Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Hi, I have a 3-year-old, and we've been plagued with this for quite a while. She's got multiple allergies, the biggest problems being gluten and dairy, but she's pretty much grain-free and dairy-free.
Wow. And Kalina?
I have one son. He's 17 months, and so we still have things that he hasn't tried yet, but we've had pretty good success with everything so far. There was one night at dinner he broke out in a rash, and we could not for the lives of us pin it down. It hasn't happened since, so I have hope that it was a fluke.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, right? I'm like, hopefully whatever it was, it's not going to come back.
Exactly. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, before we get started with today's show, we have an interesting news headline, and a lot of people have been talking about this headline. It's on the internet, and it is called the Teal Pumpkin Project, and it was first put out by an organization called FAIR, which stands for the Food Allergy and Education Research Group, and according to them, 1 in 13 children suffer from a food allergy, so they came up with the idea of what they're calling the Teal Pumpkin Project. I've seen a lot of people sharing these articles online on Facebook and stuff. So here's what it is. I should say at the time of taping this episode, it's almost Halloween, and that's what the Teal Pumpkin has to do with. So they are asking parents on Halloween night to set out a teal pumpkin, and that is going to represent that they have alternatives for children with sensitivities or allergies to the traditional candy that you might find. A lot of candy has nuts in it and some other things, that gluten, things like that may not be on your child's diet. So this is kind of a way for parents to easily be able to recognize these homes and choose whether or not they want their child to go up there. And they're not really offering food alternatives. It's more like glow sticks or something that's not food related, because there's a lot of sensitivities out there and it'd be hard to fulfill everybody's needs. So wanted to throw this out to you guys. What do you guys think about this? I'll start with Tiffany, since you have a child with allergies. Do you like this idea? Would you be looking for teal pumpkins?
I love this idea. And hopefully when my daughter's a little older, she'll be able to participate. Last year, because she can't have candy, the incentive to trick or treat really wasn't there for her. And so walking up to strangers' doors to get nothing or to get something for Dad was not appealing at all. I think we hit 5 doors before we realized we'd totally traumatized her. This year, we're lucky enough to attend a candy-free Halloween party on Halloween night, so we'll be doing that. But I'm sure as she gets older, she'll want to join in actual trick-or-treating with friends. And so hopefully the teal pumpkin catches on. That'd be really fun.
Yeah, I love this idea. It's in complete alignment with what I believe about the Halloween. We don't really give out candy, anyway. But I'm reminded of when my son and I went to my dad's place and we were going around the houses. One of the houses actually owned by a dentist gave him 3 things. One was like a king-size Snicker bar, then a full-size toothbrush, and a full-size tube of toothpaste. So
in that order, eat the candy bar.
So I had never heard of this teal project until you had mentioned it, but that was the first thing I thought about. I'm like, it's interesting.
What, no floss? Floss wasn't part of it?
You had to come back around the second time for that.
Kalina, what do you think?
Oh, I love this because there's so many kids out there that have these problems, and then we've got other family members that have allergies, and I've had siblings with severe allergies. And growing up, my poor brother, he could not tolerate dairy at all, not the slightest bit of dairy, and he would have the rash, but he had asthma, so he'd have breathing problems, and so it was very serious for him. And Halloween kind of stunk because the majority of the candy you get is chocolate, and so we'd have to sit there. We'd all dump our bags out, and luckily there was 6 kids, so this made it a little easier. But I can imagine if he was like an only child or had just one sibling, this would be problematic because we'd all dump our candy out, and he'd put all his chocolate down, and we'd sit there and we'd basically barter for all his chocolate, and he'd get whatever was not chocolate, and so. But, for kids that don't have a big family or have siblings that are willing to do that, or for whatever reason, it kind of stinks because they don't really get that full participation. And so I would totally do this. I think we definitely will do this if we end up being in the position where we're going to hand out anything. And I think that hopefully this carries on because it's wonderful to be able to include all the kids in Halloween.
Yeah.
I wanted to add just one thing when I was thinking about this teal pumpkin project. Have you guys heard of the Switch Witch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Heard of the Switch Witch?
That's a great idea too.
Yeah, so the Switch Witch is, you get all your candy, you go to your 75 houses or whatever, and you really knocked it out of the park this year, and you take all of your candy, and what happens is you put it there, and in the nighttime, the Switch Witch comes, takes all your candy, and replaces it with something else, like maybe a non-candy toy of some sort or something like that, too. But that's another way probably that people with allergies, they can still participate, but then they can still get the ultimate benefit of something at the end of it. So.
Oh, that's nice. I like that. It's hard enough to get your kids to try new foods, especially if they think these new foods could cause them to break out in hives, rashes, or even worse. And that's what it's like when your child has food allergies. Lindsay Stenovic is a featured expert on our shows. She's a registered dietitian and nutrition specialist, and her company is called Nutrition Instinct. So, Lindsay, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I should say that Lindsay is newly postpartum. She has a little boy that's in our, not in our studio right here, but who knows, he may be joining us at some point. And so we really appreciate you coming in. So tell us about food allergies. What is a food allergy compared to a sensitivity or an intolerance?
That's a really common question and a really good question. So when you're looking at just a food allergy, you're looking at an immune system response, and typically an immunoglobulin E mediated response, which is just involved in the testing, basically, as far as in terms of knowledge, what would be important to know about that. When the body is confused and thinks someone has ingested something that's harmful, for a food allergy, that would be a protein in food. And so the body thinks, oh my gosh, this is a harmful antigen, and we need to send in, our immuno response to take care of it. And it creates an inflammatory response, which then could, produce a range of symptoms. Typically for food allergies, we're looking at hives, we're looking at possibly swelling of the lips and tongue, and more severely, we're looking at what you had described earlier, trouble breathing or possibly anaphylactic shock, which is fatal. It's closing of the throat if not treated immediately. So that is what a food allergy is going to typically look like and present like, and that is tested in a doctor's office, preferably a board-certified pediatric allergist who can do a series of tests. So not just one test, they're probably going to do a skin prick test, possibly a blood test, and then maybe even do some sort of food challenge where they expose the child in office to that food and look at their response, because it's usually going to be a pretty fast response. When we're looking at something like a food sensitivity, it's a lot less well defined. They're out there, it's real, they're just not as well understood. And you're going to get a lot of different information depending on which professional you go to evaluate a food sensitivity. So there are different types of tests that are out there to evaluate whether or not someone has a sensitivity. It is typically involving the immune system, but different types of inflammatory markers than the immunoglobulin E. So they're non-immunoglobulin E mediated responses. Symptoms can range from, and Tiffany, I'd love for you to share some of your experiences, but they can range. It's not going to be something like anaphylactic shock. It could be headaches. It could be IBS. It could be arthritis, even, usually in adults. But yeah, there's a much more broad range of symptoms. So people will say, gosh, I've always had this issue. No one can solve it. And sometimes they'll go to a professional and start doing some tests and some elimination of different foods. And they find, oh my gosh, this went away.
Okay.
With that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
So Tiffany, with your daughter, how did this kind of manifest itself? How old was your daughter, and what did you start to notice?
Oh my gosh, it was from birth, from day one. And when they're little, you get a lot of different input about how my, 1 week old was strong-willed or difficult, or a lot of adult traits that you put on a child who probably just in hindsight didn't feel well. But it started with what looked like colic, and then what looked like reflux, and then what looked like chronic constipation. And it's really easy to go down different trails with the information that doesn't particularly pertain to your situation. And so we went down some of those trails and realized that really the culprit was food, and food was making her sick. And at the time, I was not going down the right trails to even know to eliminate while I was nursing, which you absolutely can do, and pretty easily with good results. So we didn't eliminate from her diet until we started around 13, 14 months old. And by 18 months, I had a completely different child. My experience with motherhood changed dramatically. I had no idea that my child was sick. I thought that all of these adult traits that people were putting on my child were real, and that she was just, she didn't in hindsight, she didn't smile until she was 6 months old, which just breaks my heart now because she didn't feel good. So I think a lot of it was excessive crying, which now I know is excessive crying. A new mother doesn't know what excessive crying. It all seems excessive. And then really when her stomach started to slow down and she was not able, and she was constipated, that was sort of like the giant red flag. And that's when you go running into the doctor. And luckily we ran into the right one. So that was helpful.
Mm-hmm. And what did they have you do? Like, was it just starting to eliminate certain foods out of the diet until you figured out where she, what issues?
Yes, we did a few different things. The first thing that they had us do was dairy, because that's very common, especially with the symptom of constipation. Dairy's the first to go, and she actually did get a little bit better, but her symptoms returned, and that's when we were working with, at that point, we were working with a naturopathic doctor, so an ND, which is different from a naturopath, but they would give her remedies that would help temporarily. And then we did an IgG panel, and that's not a perfect test, but it was perfect for us at the time. And it helped us see what to eliminate, and it made it much clearer that gluten was kind of our big bully. So, and dairy was a contributor, but we really needed to kick the gluten. And then since then, we realized that she likely has celiac disease. She's actually too sensitive to do to feed her gluten, to do a stomach biopsy to confirm it. But we're having that out of her diet, all of those things, and helping with the healing that needs to be done because of the damage to her body. She's a different kid. She's happy. She's awesome now. It's really changed our lives, our whole family's lives. So I'm very grateful.
Are the symptoms that Tiffany was describing, is that pretty consistent with what, you've seen and you've heard about, whether it's a sensitivity or an official allergy?
Again, they're going to kind of present differently.
Okay.
With an allergy, it's going to be they're going to be a little more consistent in terms of, we're probably going to see some sort of rash. We might see a change in digestion for children. Again, trouble breathing, something going on with the mouth, either swelling of the lips and tongue, some itchiness, that kind of thing would give you a red flag to go that route. And you always want to rule out that type of allergy first, because we have those tests have been around longer. They're a little more research, and they have a lower instance of false positive and false negatives, meaning you test positive but you actually don't have a problem, or you test negative and you do. And then, like Tiffany was saying, the next step, looking into the different sensitivities and the different types of immune responses that could be going on. Not a perfect test, but then if you're working with the right practitioner, a trained naturopathic doctor or a dietitian, they're not going to just hand you this list of foods and say, okay, this is their long list of no's and maybes and greens, and I'll never see you again. Thanks for your money. They're going to continue to work with you and do an elimination diet from there. So it's like a starting point, and that helps control for some of those. There's a higher incidence of false positives and false negatives. So yeah, they help work those out and really look at how is this child responding, or adult. Is that, would you say that's,
Yeah, we had a lot of help from there. It wasn't, here's your test, see you later, especially since I was insistent on needing help at that point. So
and I've had clients come in, I've had adults come in where they're like, oh, my mom took me to this person when I was 13 and gave me this long list, and since then I've eliminated soy, wheat, dairy. I mean, they list all these things where it's so difficult for them, and I could go, well, did they keep working with you on it? No. Have you had it before, like recently, and you're okay? Yeah, I can have it sometimes. So then we start to know, okay, they didn't really eliminate it correctly.
So Tiffany, I was just curious, are you finding that, when you go out, that you have to make the food, and or can you leave it? Do you, what do you have to do? I imagine it's more labor intensive to try to make sure that...
She comes packing with her own stuff pretty much everywhere she goes. But there's places we can eat. Surprisingly, it's not as hard as you'd think. We avoid things that have been cooked with other things. There's a restaurant local called Stacked, and every single time we go there, we hear people snickering around us about the fact that they carry gluten-free fries because potatoes don't have gluten. Well, you'd know if you were sensitive to gluten that if fries are cooked with chicken fingers, that's really, really dangerous for you. So gluten, yes, potatoes are gluten-free, but depending on what oil that they are cooked in or cross-contamination, that's when you can get into a lot of trouble. But we find places that we can eat and that she can eat. And she usually brings her own little side of something to supplement whatever she decides to order. But she's only 3, so 3-year-olds aren't usually restaurant connoisseurs yet anyway. It's usually for mom and dad.
Yeah. How does she feel about, I know she's still young, but does she realize that she's eating something different than, if you're at a play date or something like that, than other people? And how does she process that at this young age? It's
been a journey so far in how much she's grown in being able to self-advocate. And we did have some very unfortunate interactions when she about a year ago, which were devastating for her health-wise. But as far as eating things different, it seems to me that kids don't care very much at this age, especially. And she kind of runs around with a really cool crew of kids that all sort of eat healthier and have alternative snacks. And sometimes they'll share a pack of seaweed, which everyone can eat and they really dig. But she brings her own food, and she's okay with that. She's just started saying, I don't like gluten. It hurts my tummy. And so that's sort of the first step for her in being able to talk about it, is being able to identify some of the things that hurt her. And although that doesn't encompass everything, as soon as she says that, people don't feed her. So they're even though it doesn't account for everything, it puts a big stop sign up for her, so.
Yeah. I feel like gluten is one of those big kind of buzzwords now, and for a lot of people it needs to be, taken out of their diet. Have you found that, Lindsay, that more and more people are talking about it? Is this just something in Southern California that we hear more about, or is this kind of a national thing?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on. I think one, it is definitely a fad. There are people adults and parents that eliminate gluten for not a whole lot of reasons, just because they've heard of that and they aren't really sure what it is, but they think, oh, well, I'm going to do this for X, Y, and Z reason. And then there is an increase in diagnosis and understanding of both celiac disease, and then more practitioners are starting to look at gluten sensitivity. So gluten intolerance is celiac disease, and that is much more well understood than a gluten sensitivity at this point, at least. We're seeing an increase in understanding and diagnosis of that as well. But especially for parents with children, they just want to really make sure that they're doing that if they're eliminating any type of food, that it's for reasons that they have observed and thoroughly asked questions of medical practitioners and things like that, just because as they grow older, that might be something they stick with and not be so fond of, and they may have not had to have eliminated those foods.
Okay.
Yeah.
If someone is classified as having an official food allergy, does that stay with them? In the case of Tiffany's daughter, is that going to stay with her whole life? I mean, I know you don't treat her specifically, but this is an example, right?
Yeah. So I don't know about Tiffany's daughter, but for food allergies, kids can grow out of them.
Okay.
They're less likely, so we'll talk about the top 8 in a little bit. They're less likely to grow out of a nut, peanut, fish, or shellfish allergy. For some of the other top 8, they can.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say my brother, the one who had the severe dairy allergy when he was smaller, he can eat it now as an adult. Yeah, and it took a long time, and it was like a slow progression. Mm-hmm. So when he was like a teenager, he's like, I just really want to try chocolate. So he tries it, and it wasn't as severe of a reaction, but he still had a reaction, and he's like, and so then as he got older, then, he would try it again, and now he can eat most things, and he's okay. He's not fond of a lot of stuff with dairy in it because he didn't grow up eating it.
Yeah.
He still kind of has that association,
yeah.
But he doesn't give him as bad of a time. And you can do that. You can go stop by at the doctor's office and have them expose your child to certain foods as they're getting older, and to see how the reaction looks. Yeah.
Tiffany, have you asked that question? Is your daughter going to have that? Have you asked that to her?
Yes. It was a big blow this year because we went back to get sort of a checkup and retested when we sort of thought that she might have just been sensitive to these things. And it was like being hit by a bus all over again when they said, no, she's probably celiac. Oh. And so this is not something that she's going to outgrow and, after infancy. But, you get over it. You realize that it's this is for her health, and it makes her life easier and better. And it might be slightly more difficult for her mother, but it's not bad at all. And just on how hyped up it is right now with gluten, at least for our experience, it's been a double-edged sword. With more people knowing what gluten is, that's helpful. But with so many people coming into restaurants or anywhere saying that they can't have gluten, I've heard from a lot of people in the industry that they don't take it very seriously anymore, which is really hard. And I have a girlfriend that grew up with celiac, and she said people would just, if they found out that there was a celiac person in the restaurant, they were going to be very careful. And now you don't elicit that same reaction. So I kind of we do go places where we know that they're going to be
more receptive,
very receptive and understanding of that. So it's kind of the unfortunate side to the publicity on gluten.
Okay, well, when we come back, we're going to learn more about the top 8 foods that are causing all the fuss when it comes to food allergies. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Today we're talking with dietitian and nutritionist specialist Lindsay Stenovic, and we're talking about common food allergies in children. So now we're going to dive into our top 8 list of the different food allergies found in children that are common in children. So let's start with the first one, Lindsay, soy.
So with soy happens to be found in a lot of our products. The soy protein isolate. We use soy as a protein source or a protein component in a lot of different foods. So that can be tough. What's great about the fact that there is it's not great, but there's a top 8. So when you look at the ingredient list of a food, they're required to list if soy is part of the product is contained in the food. So you don't have to be as much of an expert at sifting through every single little ingredient, although it doesn't hurt to review it just in case, because I've worked for a school district and Head Start, and we've had many instances where we've had to call the manufacturer and say, is this correct? Is there a mistake? But yeah, you want to double check with that.
Okay.
And it is one that kids can grow out of.
Okay.
And that would include whole soy as well, like tofu, soy milk, things like that.
Okay. And wheat.
So wheat allergies, it's different than gluten allergies. So with a wheat allergy, again, we're looking at that immunoglobulin E response, and it absolutely has to be eliminated from a child's diet, but they don't have to eliminate everything that contains gluten. So it's a little bit different. They can have rye, they can have barley, oatmeal, things like that kiddos that are intolerant to gluten would have to eliminate, and among many other derivatives of those grains as well. So that's a little more complicated. But wheat will be listed on a product, and also can be one that kids grow out of sometimes.
I guess I didn't realize. I just, grouped gluten in with all wheat, and that's not true, huh?
Well, if you think about, if you're gluten sensitive or gluten intolerant, yes, every wheat product has to be eliminated. But the allergy is not to gluten, it's to proteins in wheat, which gluten is a protein in wheat.
Right.
But if it's not an allergy to gluten, then it's just elimination of wheat.
I see. Okay.
And there are a million different teeny tiny little ingredients with gluten in them. So,
okay.
If you don't have to worry about those, then that's usually found to be helpful, although Tiffany's really good at it.
Okay, dairy. I know that's a big one.
Yeah, dairy is really common. And so I think we're all pretty familiar with our dairy products, our yogurt, cheese, milk, butter, and those have to be eliminated completely, as well as any food that has casein or whey in it. Again, that will be listed on the ingredient list.
Is that breast milk too? Breast milk for babies?
No.
Okay.
No. You could have milk proteins in your breast milk, I believe. Okay. But no, they should not be allergic to breast milk. To be allergic or intolerant to breast milk is really, really rare.
I see.
Because it's made for,
right,
specifically for a baby.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Fish. Any kind of fish? Is that what we're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, fish and shellfish. Sometimes parents will have kids eliminate both, even if they haven't tested positive for both. That's kind of a combination one that we see a lot, just to be safer than sorry. And also to eliminate, if they're at school or something when they're older and people don't understand the difference, just to have both eliminated. And if it happens to be, one issue could be like burgers sometimes might have anchovies in them. That was an incident at our school at one point, our district. Yeah, so you kind of want to check. It's not
something
just
that
whole
you wouldn't
foods.
think would have fish in it.
Right,
at all.
right. It's a flavor thing, but yeah.
Okay.
Tree nuts and peanuts, same idea. A child may not test positive for both, but a lot of the times parents will eliminate both because they tend to find that they're processed in similar plants, and they're not required to say processed in a plant, that also processes peanuts or whatever. They're not actually required. They do that voluntarily. So that's a good thing for parents to know. But peanuts are legumes, where tree nuts are nuts. And so it's actually not as common for them to be allergic to both as people think. So you may not, if you have a child who's allergic to walnuts, they might still be able to consume peanuts, but that would be something that you'd obviously get tested and, discuss with your doctor. And then with egg, again, whole eggs and also egg in product. Although I don't know how they were tested, but I've had many, many children through the school districts or Head Start who can have egg cooked in product, but not a whole egg. So that's very common.
And is all this different if it's raw versus cooked? I mean, can all that play a role too, or no?
No, they'll be
Okay.
allergic whether it's raw versus cooked for any of these products, which we wouldn't recommend raw eggs, but with
Right.
like soy and things
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And also we want to look for cross-contamination with any of these. So you can do all of your due diligence and not have any
Right.
of these foods in the child's meal, but with Tiffany saying-
Gluten-free fries.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a
Just
thing
looking
too.
for
No,
cross-contamination.
there is a fast food restaurant, and I won't name names, but they add beef flavoring to their French fries, and the beef flavoring contains gluten. And I know that because my aunt has celiac, and so she told me that. I was like, "You're kidding me! It's French fries." But, they add a flavoring, and the flavoring has gluten. So
I almost feel
Oh,
like you
would
have to
never
be
know.
an investigator with this
It,
stuff.
it does feel that way.
Yeah, and it has to be scary, Tiffany, as a parent. I mean, I know, your daughter's probably not eating at all this fast food place right now, but as she grows older, you just never know what's in this stuff.
Being scared of food is a hard thing in general because food's supposed to bring people together. It's part of our culture, so being scared of it is difficult. But the upside is that she eats really healthy. We just don't go to fast food. She breaks out, healthy snacks where she goes, and she wasn't introduced to those things, so she's not really going to have much of a taste for them. So I luck out in that regard.
And Tiffany, what advice would you have for parents out there that are either listening to this? Maybe they have, kids with allergies or food sensitivities, or maybe, they just may come in contact. We all will probably come in contact with children that fit that category. So what advice do you have for parents out there?
Please, I know that it's very tempting to give a toddler or a preschooler or a small child food, and you love seeing their face when you give them something, or they might, I've heard, look hungry. I think my daughter always looks hungry, but I take 100% responsibility in feeding her, and we've had really, really bad interactions where people have put something in her hand. We've gone to I've been wearing her on my back, and someone will put a sample in her hand and I won't see it. And she was just too young not to know what it was, or even just putting it in her mouth to see, because she was at a stage where she just put things in her mouth that weren't food. And so I would just implore that people just leave it to the parents to feed their own children. I don't, as kind as it is to share a snack at the park, it could make my child very, very sick. And, outside of that, hand washing really helps a lot. Antibacterial does not, but hand washing helps. So that would help me a lot. Thanks.
Thank you for being the parent representative today. It was great hearing your story, and we appreciate that. And Lindsay, thank you so much for being with us today as well.
Thank you.
For more information on child food allergies, or if you want to learn more about Lindsay, our expert, you can visit our website at newmommymedia.com. This conversation continues for members of our Parent Savers Club. In our bonus content, Lindsay will share her thoughts on desensitizing your children to foods they may be allergic to, and whether or not you should even try it. For more information about our club, visit our website.
Hi, Parent Savers. I'm Robin Kaplan, an International Board Certified Lactation Consultant, owner of the San Diego Breastfeeding Center, and the host and producer of Parent Savers' sister show, The Boob Group. I'm here to offer some advice on different breastfeeding remedies, such as, how can I get over my fear of breastfeeding in public? I remember the first time I breastfed my son Ben in public. He was 6 weeks old. My husband Jason and I were driving up to his sister's Kim's wedding in Northern California. We had stopped in Los Angeles for lunch, and it was brutally hot, like 95 degrees in the parking lot. And I actually contemplated nursing Ben in the car, but I was sweating so profusely I figured, I gotta go in the restaurant. So into the restaurant we went. I sat down at a table and got out a large receiving blanket. I distinctly remember asking Jason to stand behind me to pull down the blanket so that I could hide my 6-week postpartum back fat. To me, covering my back was actually more important than possibly flashing a boob. Up until now, I had been helping Ben get a comfortable latch by compressing my breast into that breast sandwich. I wondered how I was going to do this without the blanket slipping off of my shoulder. I slowly lowered Ben under the blanket, lifted up my shirt, and bam! That kiddo latched without my help whatsoever. Clearly, he was a very capable participant. I just had no idea. So from then on, breastfeeding in public was a breeze. Sure, he made extremely loud gulping noises while eating, which often attracted some onlookers, but now I was comfortable feeding him anywhere, and I began to feel an incredible sense of freedom. So, here are my top tips for breastfeeding in public. First, practice at home so that you are comfortable latching your baby while sitting in different chairs and wearing different shirts. If you are uncomfortable breastfeeding in public without a cover, practice using that cover or a blanket in front of a mirror so you can actually see what you're doing. Next, find stress-free places to breastfeed in public, such as the Nordstrom's nursing room or a breastfeeding support group. It's no big deal if you flash a boob in front of other moms, and you can also ask them what tricks they have tried to become comfortable nursing in public. Another trick is to practice breastfeeding in a carrier, wrap, or sling. I remember my sister-in-law walking around the San Diego Zoo while nursing her daughter in a Moby wrap. It was super discreet, and she didn't even have to stop and sit down. Lastly, go to lunch with a few other breastfeeding moms and practice in their company. You will most likely feel less stressed if you are surrounded by other women, plus you can learn some valuable tricks from them. For more great information about different breastfeeding remedies, check out my blog at sandiegobreastfeedingcenter.com/blog, and be sure to listen to Parent Savers and the Boob Group for fantastic conversations about breastfeeding and breastfeeding support.
That wraps up our show for today. We appreciate you listening to Parent Savers. Don't forget to check out our sister show, Preggy Pals, for expecting parents, the Boob Group for moms who breastfeed their babies, and Twin Talks for parents of multiples. This is Parent Savers, empowering new parents.
This has been a New Mommy Media production. The information and material contained in this episode are presented for educational purposes only. Statements and opinions expressed in this episode are not necessarily those of New Mommy Media and should not be considered facts. While such information and materials are believed to be accurate, it is not intended to replace or substitute for professional medical advice or care, and should not be used for diagnosing or treating healthcare problem or disease or prescribing any medication. If you have questions or concerns regarding your physical or mental health or the health of your baby, please seek assistance from a qualified healthcare provider.
New Mommy Media is expanding our lineup of shows for new and expecting parents. If you have an idea for a new series, or if you're a business or organization interested in joining our network of shows through a co-branded podcast, visit newmommymedia.com. Hey mamas, don't forget to check out Mighty Moms. It's our online community built for new moms just like you. Not only can you connect with other moms, but you can also join us backstage for special mom-only online events. And you'll also be notified when we're recording so you can join us as a special guest. Visit our website, newmommymedia.com, and click on the Mighty Moms banner. It's free. That's newmommymedia.com. See you there.